we ended with some boys were making fun of Doming. They were calling him names, and he was excited that he could go to school. These other boys, they had to go work in the fields, which was much rougher, I'm sure, in the heat there in the Philippines. So we're going to continue with our story here. There was great excitement in the village where Doming lived. Even the chickens seemed to know this was a very special Sunday morning, for the roosters began crowing before 3:30, which was their usual time to begin. By 8 o'clock, almost all the villagers were on their way to the little church which they had built since the missionaries had come. Some went to worship inside, others to watch from the outside. Today, the church now had a door and a concrete floor. It was raining, but this made no difference to the Filipinos. They were accustomed to a lot of rain, and a concrete floor instead of the usual muddy floor on rainy days was something to be celebrated. Doming looked out the door of his home. He observed that the people were coming from a distance. This he knew, for they were riding in calaces. The two-wheel carts bumped up and down as horses pulled them through the mud. The leaves of banana trees, wet with rain, flapped in the breeze. How noisy the village was, and how Doming longed to join the crowd going to the little church. But there was always Grandfather watching over Doming and his mother. Grandfather thought of them as his family since he was the only man living there. And as he so often said, none of his family was ever to become Christians. Yet Doming dared to plead, "Please, Grandfather, can't we go and just watch from the outside? Surely this can do us no harm." Doming guessed that Grandfather was curious and really wanted to see what the Christians did in church. This would be a good opportunity when they were celebrating the new door and concrete floor, for he would scarcely be noticed in the crowd. And so it was that Doming, his mother, and Grandfather joined the crowd on the outside. Grandfather was careful to keep them as far away as possible, though gradually during the service he moved closer and closer. Doming and his mother smiled and followed Grandfather. The rain had stopped and they could see inside very well, for the new door stood open. Ah, Doming thought, there is Rosa and her mother. Many times Doming stopped to talk to Rosa on his way to or from school, when he thought Grandfather would not see him. Rosa was a Christian. She taught a Sunday school class in the church. Often she had talked to Doming about the Lord Jesus. Doming longed to know more. Oh, how he longed to know more. Doming was surprised because Grandfather stayed and listened for a long time. He seemed to enjoy the singing. When the Filipino pastor preached about the Lord Jesus, who said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by me," and when the pastor told his listeners that the only way they could ever go to heaven was by trusting Jesus, the Son of God, who had died for them and rose from the dead, Grandfather put his hand on his knife hanging at his side. And once again, terrible fear made itself felt in the heart of the Filipino boy. Grandfather really hated Christians. "We go home," Grandfather said in an angry tone. "There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet." Many of the watchers began to leave. It was close to noon and very hot. The service went on and on, yet it did not seem to be too long for the Christians who were worshiping inside. Doming's mother prepared the usual meal of fish and rice, but today she cooked the rice with a special root which made the rice a beautiful golden yellow. It was delicious. Yet Doming could not help but think of the feast the Christians would be having today as part of their celebration. Some of them would eat roasted pig. Some would even have balu. Remember Sister Lepla? I'll remind you. Doming's mouth watered as he thought of the balu, a hard-cooked egg with a duckling inside, just about ready to hatch.
Oh my.
Yeah, I remember you speaking about it in our missionary service. After their simple meal, Grandfather rolled out his sleeping mat and lay down for a nap. Doming's mother went to visit a neighbor. This was Doming's chance to slip away. Putting on his coolie hat to protect him from the sun, which was shining brightly now, he walked a little way along the road and slipped inside the house where Rosa and her mother lived. He just had to know more about the God they loved. Later in the afternoon, Doming squatted beside his grandfather outside their home. Together they watched the beautiful sun setting over the mountain. Grandfather really loved Doming, and at such times as they sat together quietly, Doming tried to pray, but he did not know how. He wanted God to touch grandfather's heart somehow so they could be Christians, as Rosa and her mother were. Grandfather sat chewing betel nuts, spitting the red juice on the ground, talking, as he so often did, about the days when he was a boy living on the island of Mindanao. There on that island so far away, grandfather said, men were really men, not soft and silly as they are in this town. Why, when I was a boy, and Doming knew grandfather was off on tales of his boyhood, tales which Doming loved to hear, and yet tales which brought great fear to his heart.